Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today, we return to Oz. I'm, of course, referring to one of the biggest, most anticipated film releases of the year, Wicked for Good, the second half of the epic story of the Wicked Witch of the West. But this film is something of a departure in tone from the first one. It's darker, more somber, and I'm curious what you all thought of it. If you've seen the film when it premiered last weekend, please let us know what you thought by leaving us a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we're so happy to welcome back to the show director Jon M, the visionary director of this film and of Part 1, which earned 2 Academy Awards and a total of 10 nominations. And I'm excited to welcome for the first time director of photography Alice Brooks. She not only shot both films, but has been working with Jon on projects since their film school days back at USC, including their musical adaptation of Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights. But navigating the tonal shift of this musical from Part 1 to Wicked for Good represented a unique creative challenge for the filmmaking team, which they decided very early on would be split into 2 separate films. That's exactly where I wanted to start today's conversation, by asking about what that decision opened up in terms of going deeper into the story and for exploring the world that they wanted to build, both the light and the dark, or, if you will, the good and the wicked. Here's director Jon M.
I mean, that's kind of actually what it did. It really allowed us to have room to dive deeper with the characters, to follow their trajectory. You know, movie 1 is sort of the fairy tale setup. There's an answer to it, what it means to stand out and be who you are. And yet, that's great and all, but the consequences of a choice like that are much deeper and much more complicated, much more nuanced. And in a weird way, it's our adult selves looking back at our childhood fairy tales and picking up the pieces of those things and deciding, what are we going to carry forward? Are we allowed to dream in the way we used to, when we know the truth of the messiness of this world? And movie 2 is much more of a challenge to us in this time that we live in, about now that we know the truth, who are we going to be and what story we're going to pass on to our children? In a way, it was always thought of as a master plan of 2 movies over a span of 1 year for our audience to experience. And having that room in movie 2 allowed us to not just do the show that's on the stage, but actually to reflect on the show that's on the stage, and reflect on the Wizard of Oz, and reflect on the things that we believe or were taught to believe in a complicated time.
Yeah, I was so struck by the themes, but I was also really struck by the difference in the tone of the 2 films. Mm-hmm. You know, as you touch on, you know, the first film is about that very unlikely friendship that forms between Elphaba and Glinda. And I feel like visually the film is very bright and effervescent. And the second film is much darker. Obviously, they're separated for most of the film, and you're expressing much deeper, darker themes. Especially that theme of, like, what do you do when the place that you love no longer loves you? That was so, I just found that to be so moving. So it's a really interesting tonal shift. So I'm curious for the both of you to talk about how you approach the second film visually and how it looks different from the first film.
Yes, that effervescence that when Jon and I first started talking about the movies, we talk about emotional intentions. And some of those emotional intentions for the first movie were dreams and yearning and friendship and choice. And the second movie, they were separation and sacrifice and surrender and consequence. And so quickly in our conversations, it became clear that the first movie would glow in daylight, and the second movie would be steeped in a density and maturity and shadow. And so we have these 2 worlds. We've got the whole arc, the whole visual arc of both movies, but each lived in their own distinct worlds. And the first hour of the first movie is all day exterior, and 90% of the movie takes place during the day. And the last 40 minutes of the first film is one long sunset, as that ends as Elphaba finds her power and leaps off the Emerald City Tower and flies off into the night. And that sets the tone for the second movie, where it's 90% of it takes place at night, or in like the deep underbellies of Oz, the parts of Oz that we didn't know existed.
One of the things that struck me about both films is the way you move the camera. It's very connected. There's movement in the frame, obviously, but also you're moving the camera a lot too, and giving it a lot of energy. Is there a difference in the way you move the camera in the second film versus the first film?
It's more about, it's not just camera movement, but it's framing, and all our choices, all our lens choices, color choices, and movement choices are all rooted in those emotional intentions. And the second film opens with our two women apart, and whereas the first movie they occupy almost every frame together, and so in this movie we introduce, in the opening number, we introduce Glinda in her world, where the entire universe revolves around her, and we see her in bubbles and circles, and we have these refined classic old-time Hollywood movie shots where we're on cranes and we're moving into her and everything's choreographed and lyrical, whereas Elphaba is raw and textured, and she's created this beautiful space that she lives in, and there are it's a nest with branches everywhere and raw materials surrounding her, and just one hole where the light comes in, and so she's in this shadow, she's in hiding, and we introduce her in this space in the opening number in these series of close-ups, and a lot of her shots are handheld or steady cam, and we're visceral and with her. And immediately we have a dichotomy between the two worlds. And when they are together, then we pull at your heartstrings a bit by echoing shots that we did in the first film.
And also, I think that the truth is in the stillness. You know, this is a musical, but we're using the energy and the rhythm of music and can counter those things. The Oz Dust, for instance, in movie one, that stillness and that quietness is why that moment impacts us. And in the beginning of movie two, it is action and this stuff is happening. And in a weird way, it's like a shark that needs to move in the water to breathe. And suddenly, Elphaba, because of this decision, the consequence of this decision is independence feels like rejection until it starts to feel like growth. But sitting in that darkness, alone and still, is where she doesn't know what to do. And in a weird way, Glinda is the opposite. She's moving through space, doing her thing, going to her whistle stops, making the things. And she can't find herself until the stillness of Girl in the Bubble and the quietness and the almost silence of when she shuts that door after Witch Hunters. And when she walks for the first time, there's no fanfare, and you just hear her heels clicking and her giant dress like moving back and forth like a clown outfit. It's the first time you really almost go meta with the movie, because it feels like a person in a costume on a set. And that was very intentional, and things that we discovered along the way. But that's sound, that's picture, that's costume, that's Ariana understanding that. And so we're playing with that the whole time, and even reflections and distortions, but we can get into that in another conversation.
Well, while I think of it, though, there's something, because Jon just was mentioning sound so much. It's interesting because when we colored this movie, Jon was also doing the mix, and so, you know, the sound and me, we were fighting for his time, and then Jon went away for a week. He had another obligation, and they finished the mix, he went away, and we paused the DI. And in that time, I got the mix back. And so every choice that they made in the mix, suddenly I get to look at in the DI. And now knowing like where all those choices they made, and we had done, you know, we had done our big pass on the DI, but then suddenly I can refine things based off the sound mix, which I've actually never had the opportunity to do before, and it was this huge eye-opening experience for me.
You just like warmed the cockles of my heart. I've never heard of that happening before, of the cinematographer having the final mix during the last pass of the DI. I'm just fascinated. Like, can you give us an example of something that you know, maybe something that you changed an approach to as a result of having access to the final mix during those sessions?
Well, when he was talking about Girl in the Bubble and that sound dropping out, like I had the Avid mix, I guess, is what I was coloring, you know, what I had to listen to in the DI. But the powerfulness of there being no sound was so striking. And then we just adjusted our levels, our density just slightly based off of that. Because suddenly, if you have no sound, does something else appear too bright? And we're talking about little teeny micro choices, but that was a moment for sure.
But it's amazing that you had access and were able to do that. I think that's something we should encourage more people to do.
I know. I told the sound team that, and they're like, "That should be the standard from now on."
Yeah. So on a practical basis, I mean, I know you shot both of the films back to back. Was that kind of a fairly strict thing, or were you checkerboarding scenes for 1 and 2 while you were going through, or tell us about that process?
I mean, a lot of it was logistics because when you have such big builds, I mean, we're building Munchkinland, Emerald City, we have these giant tulip fields and things, and you're building giant heads that move in trains. Like, there are restrictions because at a certain point, by the time you greenlight the train, because it's going to cost a certain amount and you get the okay to do that, now you're a month away from shooting and you don't have the train. So part of that is logistics. But we were shooting for so long that it was going to sort of iron its way out. And so when you're looking at that, then you're going from small sets and building up from there, which can complicate things because that means, hey, there might be a scene where in the beginning of the day you're in movie 1 and by the end of the day you're in movie 2. And which also meant that in our prep, we had a long prep. I mean, I think we needed longer, but let's say we had a decent amount enough prep that we had to have every musical number. That's like 20 musical numbers, choreographed, staged, rehearsed with Alice and her team so they know what equipment to get. Kind of lensed a little bit, kind of edited a little bit on our own iPhones and things like that. We had to have costume designs according to choreography because we needed to know what kind of shoes, the designs of the, Glinda's suite, private suite. That was designed because we knew we were going to do this girl in the bubble sequence of going into the mirrors. So that means it had to almost be like a Muppet stage because you needed trap doors and walls that close and things like that. And it had to actually accommodate this circular nature of what we were going to do. How many steps? How steep can it be? How big can the platform be so that the Steadicam can on there? Where in the stage does it fit so you don't get up against a wall, even though we were backed up against the wall because it was just so big. So all these elements we are balancing and changing in real time. And the musical numbers aren't written in the script right away. It's pretty basic in the script and we design it accordingly. And I don't love to just come up with a concept. I like to work with the actors, kind of hear how they're singing it, feel what we need, emotionally, and how to reflect that visually, and then I will come up with the concept. And so it's a little bit later in the game when everyone's budgets are being hacked and beaten up a little bit, and then everyone makes room for the new ideas, and then we readjust. And so there's a lot of stuff happening. Now the girls, Cynthia and Ari, and our whole crew, they have to keep up with what day when we're doing certain things. I know the girls had a technique of having perfume for different different movie, so they knew. Hair and makeup had different freckles and different intensity of makeup. And then for Good, for instance, that was a rain cover set. Because it was the last, which is crazy to think that we were going to force that on them. But the reality is we had gone through all our cover sets. So the last one available was For Good in Kiamako. And that set was barely even done. And it rained, of course, it's London. And we're like, the only thing we can do is go to For Good. So I had to sit down with the girls, calm them down and say, listen, we got some extra days on this. So if we don't get it the first day, let's just break the ice. Let's just pretend this is a rehearsal day and let's just try. And actually there's some really good stuff that came out of that. And then I feel for Alice because then, when you suddenly change all that stuff and all the lighting changes and they gotta work way faster than they ever have. And it's the most gentle, most delicate part of the movie. So it was a whole thing.
We were outside in Munchkinland, like shooting the opening number, and then suddenly we're shooting the end of the last movie. And there's this whole color story that I've told throughout the movies, and using every color of the rainbow to light certain scenes. And in For Good, blue is the color of Elphaba and Glinda's love for each other, and I lit it like the Oz dust. You first see the blue light in the Oz dust, and then you see it in the moonlight. And then orange is the color of Elphaba's transformation, and we see it when she lights the flames in No Good Deed and becomes the Wicked Witch of the West. And we used real fire and real flame bars and real torches to light scenes in Kiamako, including For Good. And it's all a delicate balance. I worked so long with Lee Sandals, our set decorator, to where each torch was going to be placed in Kiamako, but those torches weren't up on the day we were supposed to be shooting. So you've got all the right, like they just weren't ready, but we had it all mapped out. It just, they weren't up yet. And so all these things that, all the choices you make, and then suddenly like the reality of, okay, now we've got to rise to a new challenge, which is we're shooting the end of the second movie now.
That is just amazing. And now I understand that there was a concept for the original concept for the ending of the For Good sequence that didn't quite work out. So you had to pivot. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's the cranes. So,
I was like, what do we call? Oh yeah, the crane. I mean, that was a big conceptual thing. We had cranes there ready to go. We had all the tricks because this is the last song of a 2-movie musical. Like, you want the big ender. But that's just not what our movie asked of us in the end of the day, no matter what we thought it would need. The girls were performing it in a very specific way. And my conversations with Alice, it became very clear that this had to be it's about clarity and about simplicity. Saying goodbye isn't complicated. I mean, it is maybe emotionally, but at the same time, you don't have much to complicate. This is it. And I love the way Alice shot this. I mean, it's tricky when you have two singers who, and usually in this song, and they're singing live again, that they on the stage, they sing out to the audience. So you see both of their faces the whole time, even if they're looking at each other. In a movie, if they're actually singing to each other, they probably should be looking at each other. And then you get half their face. And so the choices of where we are when we hear what word and how, that's also goes to editorial. But Alice, you can talk about sort of all the other things in there, but it was, even though it looks simple, even though it looks clear, there's a lot of thought that goes into every moment of that, from performance to sound. How much do you hear the other person reacting to the song to make them present? How much do you hear their breathing? How much do you feel the liveness of this music? What is the orchestra doing? How hesitant are the strings, or how confident are the strings? So, I think those are all parts of, when you hear the leaves rustle, these were all things that were considered and are all part of the audio and visual landscape of why you feel a certain way by the end of it. If you are crying by the end of it, it's not because it's just because of the song. I mean, that song does a lot, but there's a gentleness to it. We've heard that song done in every different way, covered by so many people all around the world. It's the most covered song, and yet it feels like you're hearing it for the first time. And it's because of the work underneath it all that makes it feel easy.
What I love about working with Jon, we've known each other for 25 years, and working with your friend or someone you trust so much as a filmmaker, we are able to stand on that parapet together and go, okay, this isn't working. What are we going to do? What are we going to do next? And we kept doing the crane shot, and it didn't work. The two women were facing each other. You couldn't see their eyes, and they're in profile, and you want to be right there with them, feeling every single feeling that they felt, that we felt through both movies. All 5 hours of movies are culminating in this moment. And so we kept trying different crane speeds. The Ariana and Cynthia are pouring their hearts out, and we are not getting it. And then Jon and I were watching playback, and we went back to what the motion of the scene is, and what were the shots that we had used what are some of the shots we used in the first movie when they were together that worked so well. And one of them was our 360 degree shot, and we see it in the Ozdas Ballroom, and we see it in Defying Gravity, but we're at the end of the day, and they're blocked right at the edge of the set, and then there's a 10-foot drop. And so we don't have anywhere to put Steadicam. And then we also don't have anywhere to light it from because we didn't rig the right lights around to do a 360-degree shot. And it's Friday at 6 p.m. and it's time to go home for the weekend. And so Jon had to talk to Cynthia and Ari and say, we're going to need to come back on Monday morning. And I had to talk to my team and go, okay, we need to build a platform so our Steadicam operator can do this 360. And then I had to talk to the lighting team about how are we going to do it when we don't have anything rigged. And so I spent the weekend lighting, and Grip spent the weekend building this platform. And then Monday morning we came back. But also Jon said, okay, well, we're going to do this, but then we're going to have you guys say goodbye to each other in a split screen in the doorway when Alpha puts Glinda in the closet. And he's like, we're going to do this all at once now. And he's like, and it has to be a live in-camera split screen. And I'm like, well, then the wall has to go away. And Nathan's like, well, if I pull the set apart, then the set's pulled apart and we have more scenes to shoot here. And then Jon's like, but this is how we're going to do it. We're not covering one and then the other. They're going to sing their song and then go in there and say goodbye to each other with all that emotion. And everyone rose to the challenge and made that happen so that Jon and Ari and Cynthia could have that moment forever. So
and we never used that set again.
That is amazing. Well, but ultimately, it's all about supporting the performance and getting that moment captured. That's so beautiful.
I mean, that's what it all comes down to. And if you don't have a team that understands that prioritizes that first, then you're going to hold resistance. People aren't going to do the thing. But everyone knew the priority. No matter how much work we spent on something, the movie always had to move where it was telling us to move. And that can be hard on people. But at the same time, when everyone agrees on it, it's like, that's why the movie feels loose in it. That's why it doesn't feel constructed in it. It feels a little bit, I mean, it doesn't, I don't think looks like an independent movie, but we made it in a way that we could make calls very quickly. And I think that's when people say it feels intimate, which it's a big movie. It has big scope, and yet it feels intimate because I think we're moving in a way that's following the emotion of these characters.
Absolutely. And it's easy to kind of get caught up in the big sweeping moments and the production numbers. But I think
and we're good at that. We do that. That's great.
You are very, very good at that. Those are very impressive. But I love sort of the more quiet moments. And I was so struck by that. You know, we've wanted this film to see Glinda and Elphaba together, and that very intimate, gentle moment, you know, the night before the wedding when Elphaba comes to Glinda's, apartment, and they have that moment out on the veranda and then come into the apartment. I also just thought it was just beautifully shot, very simply shot, seemingly.
Are you all right?
I'm fine. I just wanted to come and see you.
That means a lot to me, Elfie. But if anyone discovers you...
I know. You never saw me. I was never here. Do you understand?
No, I can't bear this anymore. I'm taking you to see the wizard.
Absolutely not.
Yes.
No! This is between the wizard and I.
I understand, but you have to trust me. I know how to talk to him, and maybe I could help work something out.
Alice, can you talk a little bit about your approach to that sequence? Because it's just everything is so simple, but perfect.
As Jon was just talking, one of the key words he said to all of us is he wanted this movie to feel handmade. And so it was really about restraint and simplicity. And that creates an elegance. Elegance and classic and old Hollywood, these were all words he infused in everyone. And so when we finally get to see them together in this movie for the first time, and everything is still, and we just sit in a shot that doesn't move as they face each other, and then we do some very simple close-ups, and where they've got very tight eye lines with each other, and they're looking at each other, and first they're at a distance, and then they come closer together, and sometimes the harder choice is to be simple because there's always the idea of, oh, how can we make this more complicated? How can we wow people? But the close-up to me is the most powerful thing. And I remember in film school, my professor said, anyone can do a big wide shot and someone can go, oh my God, that's amazing. He's like, but really and truly, the cinematographer needs to master the close-up.
That's a great piece of advice. Yeah. That being said, there are some gorgeous shots in this film. I think I'm haunted by the image of Ariana walking through the butterflies, at the wedding sequence. It's just that's so amazing. This movie looks so stunning in Dolby Vision. I'm thinking about the strong side lighting, especially in the scenes with Elba's treetop lair and during No Good Deed. Alice, tell me about you. You mentioned working on the DI. I'm kind of curious about your relationship with the colorist and how you're in that phase. You're kind of using HDR and Dolby Vision to kind of elevate the experience of the story.
I'm glad you mentioned No Good Deed, because that was one place where we really took the HDR to our advantage, and being able to make the grimmery glow in this really intense way that exists in the STR version, but it just is it's more heightened in Dolby Vision. And the thing I love about Dolby Vision is there's a quality control to knowing if you're going to go see a movie in Dolby Vision, it's exactly the way, if you go see our movie in Dolby Vision, I should say, it's exactly the way we intended it to be seen. There is a quality, the projector is going to be at the right illumination, at the right distance, everything will be the exact right recipe for the way we colored this film.
And Jon, for you, having access to creative tools like Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision, how does that elevate the experience for the audience?
Well, I think one of the most difficult thing when you make a movie is that it's thousands of people and hands are crafting this story, and every color, every shadow, every sound, where it is, how it feels, at what volume, it all counts. Like, I'm sitting there. We're calibrating everything. What yellow is that yellow brick road? Is it neon yellow or honey yellow? Or is it something else? And is that green, sea green, moss green? Like, what is that? And we do a lot, and I want people to see it the way we intended to see it, because when you see it, it's the most powerful version of the story. And so when you send it out into the world, you don't know if the hardware is working with the software, the emotional software that we make. And so what I love about Dolby Cinemas is that the hardware that it's going into, that it will play at the levels that you are asking it to play, that will have the shadow and color of the dynamics. And usually we stretch those dynamics. We want the audience, you're paying good money. Why not get the quality that you're paying for and get the full spectrum of color and all the dynamics of specific colors? You're going to see all types of greens now. You're going to have a whole exploration of yellows now. And you're going to see in the shadows, because that's where the truth is in our movie. And so you're going to see the little tear at the bottom of her eye within the shadow, and you're going to get more information about what the story is about. So to know that when you're in the room, and we saw this at the premiere the other day with Dolby, and that I knew that we were in the most beautiful cinema I've ever been in, and it feels so classy with the classiest movie inside of it, and it just felt like it all worked. This is the way to experience this movie at its greatest sort of stretch and dynamics. That is the dream for me, to know exactly how you're going to see it, so I can walk you through this story in the exact way that we all, the thousands of hands from all around the world, intended it to be. And you just know that with Dolby. It's really easy when we have conversations with cinematographers to get off in the weeds and talk about lenses and filters and the decisions that get made in the DI and how you interact with visual effects. But I got to hear you guys in a Q&A, and one of the things that really struck me was there was this beautiful moment. Cynthia was talking about the experience of shooting No Good Deed, and she told this really beautiful story, Alice, about what you said to her and about how she felt supported by you in that moment. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we were filming No Good Deed, and she had wanted to see playback, and she went and looked at playback, and she's in No Good Deed. She's building an army of monkeys around her, and there are no monkeys. She's in a space with that she's just singing to no one, but she has to imagine all these monkeys there, flying monkeys there, and this is her big number, and she's worked so hard for it, and she's flying in the scene and on wires and singing live, and she sat down on she called it a beanbag, but it was a stunt pad. And I could just see her being very quiet. And I just sat down next to her. And I often don't talk to actors. I keep to myself. And I just said to her, I'm like, I just want you to know, Cynthia, I'm taking care of you and don't worry about anything. And she said after that, she never watched playback again, that she fully trusted me.
That's amazing. I mean, first of all, it was so clear watching the team on stage how much love you all have for each other, and what a seems like a truly amazing experience it was to make this film. But I was just struck by something that we don't talk very much about, which is like the very intimate relationship between the cinematographers and the actors. And so you say that you don't talk to the actors very much, but clearly they feel trust for you.
I'm very quiet human being on set. I'm a quiet presence, I should say.
But I do know the actors really appreciate that. The actors who are smart know who's actually making these performances look good or not. They can ruin the performance too. And so I know how much they appreciate Alice's calm, her command, that if the energy around an actor, they're being asked to be emotionally available for the camera. They're inviting the camera to be in their most vulnerable moments, and the person behind that is Alice. And if they trust that person, they let you in further. And I know for a fact that in moments when I couldn't necessarily get to them, they knew because Alice was there that they could do that. And sometimes because Alice and I are creative partners in this, it's not even about the image itself. Alice will just whisper to me like, it doesn't feel like she's opening up to us. And that doesn't mean where she's blocked. She means like, what is she feeling? And so I appreciate that. It's not just about the camera, actually. It's about, are we saying this right thing? I know she knows me most intimately about what we're trying to get, because we've had to talk there, and so we can help each other. Or I'm like, hey, I think we need to have more light here because I want to see her eyes. Is that okay to do that here? And she'll be like, of course, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's that sort of vulnerability and trust that goes with knowing someone for so long, is that we can say anything to each other, and I can whisper in Jon's ear a reason why I don't think it's working, and I know when to say something, and I also know when it's not the moment, like when he's thinking about something and he won't be able to process it, and so, but that just takes years and years of working together and understanding each other, and also, having just being in the trenches with each other and having really hard moments on really hard sets, and then really huge successes together. I mean, we've had highs and lows and have come through on the other side both ways.
And we've shot 160 days and we've shot 20 days. And we've shot 48 hours with no money, or 15 minutes because they're about to kick us out. The police are coming and you have 15 minutes to shoot a whole scene. We have done all of that.
Amazing.
Or the fire department showing up in the middle of us shooting one of our biggest numbers.
Yes.
The Heights.
Oh yes.
Next
oh
part.
yes. Or that the sun is going down and you have a crane that you rented and you spent your whole budget on this crane, and because you're a student, and this crane shows up and it's wobbly and not working and you're like, I don't know what to do, and she figures it out because that sun is about to go away.
Well, to your point, you guys met at USC. You've been collaborators for all of this time. And you started off, you were kids starting off together, and now you've kind of climbed to this pinnacle with making these huge films, very, very successful. And so I can imagine that there's some kids out there maybe listening to this conversation. We've got a lot of young filmmakers and aspiring filmmakers that listen to this podcast, that they see your work and they think, I want to do that. I want to be there someday. So what do you say to those kids? What do you say to maybe the younger version of yourself, who see where you are now and they want to be where you are?
For me, I would say patience, survive. I think if I don't know if I'd want to hear this back then because I'm glad that I was sort of naive, but I will say if you're built for this business, you're built to survive. And maybe you have to survive 7 years before you get your break. So be prepared and make. You do not get better without making, and find your community because you can't pay for everything right now. Well, maybe certain people can, but most of you cannot. And so the people that are going to help you are your friends. And you may have different paths in between, which Alice and I very much did. And then we found each other on the other end of it. And we're better for that. We can call each other out. We expect more from each other. And we get to live not just a productive, creative life. We get to live a beautiful life outside of that because we have gone through this adventure, and we can look back at the roads that we have taken, ups and downs, and say, wow, you were there when I was dreaming that, and I was there when you were dreaming that. And look and now we have children and they're dreaming it. Forget about making movies. There is no better feeling about life than being able to have that story to yourself and to look back on what you've been able to do with a friend. It's pretty powerful stuff.
You know, a young woman who thinks like, oh, I hadn't even thought about cinematography before until I saw Alice. What would you say to her?
The thing I did not expect on this crazy Aussie adventure that we've been on for me for the last 5 years is the people that I would encounter along the way after the first movie had come out. And these children and young women who just stop me and say, thank you for making this movie. I see myself in you, or thank you for this movie. I see myself in Elphaba or Glinda. And for me, this movie is so much, each movie has meant something different to me. And I'm constantly learning about myself from this movie, and Girl in the Bubble has been this number for me I woke up this morning just thinking about Girl in the Bubble and about who is the person I now want to be and who is the person I have been, and always and looking at that. And the other night at a Q&A, there was this little boy, 4 or 5 years old, who raised his hand, but no one gave him the microphone, right? They gave all the grownups the microphone. And as he was walking out with his parents, I knelt down by him. I'm like, did you have a question for me? And he couldn't look me in the eye, and he had his little Elphaba doll, and he was holding her. And he said, thank you for making Elphaba. I'm Elphaba too. And then he started flying his doll around. And that's who we made this movie for. It's for the people who find themselves, who find their power, who find who they really want to be. And maybe it is that they see a female cinematographer shooting a big, huge movie, and they go, oh, if she can do it, so can I. And I think the thing, people always ask me about, what do as a woman, what should I be looking for? And I always say, find the directors who tell stories about diversity, who hire people of all genders, all races, because those are the stories you want to be part of telling, and those are the people you want to be with.
That's great. I can't think of a better way to end it. Alice, Jon, you've made an amazing 2 movies. Congratulations on the success of the second one. And thank you so much for coming on the Dolby podcast today and talking to us about it. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Many thanks to Jon and Alice for joining us on the show today, and an extra special thanks to our friends at Universal Pictures for helping us put this conversation together. As you can imagine, it was quite a challenge to get an hour with Jon and Alice in the lead up to the opening of the film. This is actually the first of 2 conversations we're having about Wicked for Good. Please join me again in a couple of days when we post my conversation with the film's sound team about the extraordinary sound and music of the film. Unless you've been hiding out in a witch's cave, you've no doubt heard that Wicked for Good is now in theaters. And if you can catch it in a Dolby cinema, as Jon and Alice said, it's the best way to experience the film as the filmmakers intended, in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. We will have links, as always, to the show in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. If you'd like to check out our other episodes about Wicked, you can find all those links, including our episode with the original composer and lyricist of Wicked on Broadway, Stephen Schwartz, in our show notes. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.